All right, let's dive into some Clausewitz. You know, that Prussian military theorist wrote that masterpiece on war.
Oh, yeah.
You actually sent over some excerpts, and I gotta admit, I'm a little intimidated. The guy saw war firsthand, right? During the Napoleonic era?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it was a period of just massive upheaval. Everything changed about warfare.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. He even fought briefly on the Russian side against Napoleon.
Wow.
So, yeah, talk about shaping your worldview, right?
Yeah. I mean, those experiences, they really come across in his writing. Like, he actually says, point blank, the old military manuals, they're useless because real war, it's just way too complex. You
Yeah.
can't have these, like, fixed rules. So what was he trying to do? Like, rewrite the rule book?
I think it's almost more like throw out the rule book. He wanted to like guide commanders' thinking.
Okay.
Like, give them a framework, right, to navigate the fog of war. It's not about step-by-step instruction.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. But, like, how do you even begin to create a framework for something as chaotic as war?
Right.
That's where his remarkable trinity comes in. It's the
Exactly.
core of his thinking.
Yeah. He recognized that war is this blend of these seemingly opposite forces,
Right.
almost paradoxical.
Mm-hmm.
And so he kind of visualized it as this like three-legged stool. First, you have this primordial violence, hatred, like raw emotion, just, the blind natural force.
Yeah.
And then chance, probability.
Uh-huh.
That's where skill and luck collide.
Right, right.
And then finally, political objectives. You know, the logic, the goals, the calculations.
You've got, like, fire, dice, and a chessboard all mixed into one.
Yeah. I mean, no wonder he compares war to a card game.
Right. Yeah.
Like, you could be the most skilled card player in the world, but if you're dealt a bad hand, you're going to lose.
Right.
And in war, those random cards could be anything. A sudden storm,
Yeah.
a miscommunication, or just dumb luck on the enemy side.
Yeah.
So yeah, even with the best strategy, luck's still a factor.
It's kind of unsettling to think about, especially, when lives are at stake.
Yeah. But Clausewitz, he wouldn't shy away from that reality.
Yeah.
He embraced it.
Okay.
And that's why he stresses adaptability. You got to be able to adjust your strategy as the situation on the ground changes.
Okay, yeah. I'm starting to see how this thinking approach works, right?
Yeah.
This is more about guiding, like, principles, not rules. But how does this trinity, how does it actually play out in the real world? Like,
Right.
did Clausewitz see it in action during his own, military career?
Oh, absolutely. And I think
Yeah.
the perfect example is the French Revolution. It happened during his lifetime.
Yeah.
It just completely upended centuries of military thinking.
Yeah.
Imagine, 18th century warfare. It was much more contained. You've got professional armies, set-piece battles, clear objectives, like taking a fortress.
Yeah.
But the revolution just throws all that out the window.
So was it just the scale of the conflict? Like, Napoleon was carving out an empire, right, across Europe.
I mean, that was part of it, but it was more than just scale. It was ideology. Suddenly, you've got entire nations mobilized for war, and they're fueled by these passionate beliefs like liberty, equality, fraternity,
Right.
And so the lines between soldier and citizen, they just blur.
So the conflict becomes much more, like, intense, right?
Absolutely. And unpredictable.
Yeah.
Much harder to control.
It sounds like total war. Like, we hadn't really seen that before.
Yeah.
What did Clausewitz think about all this?
Well, he was actually quite critical of Prussia's initial response, which was to basically accommodate Napoleon.
Really?
Yeah. He thought Prussia needed to harness the power of the people, embrace this new concept of nation in arms.
That's pretty radical.
Yeah, for a Prussian military officer, right?
Yeah. It was seen as a bit dangerous.
Oh, absolutely. Revolutionary even.
Yeah.
But Clausewitz, he truly believed that these popular uprisings, if you could channel them effectively, they could become a major asset.
So we're not just talking about, like, angry peasants with pitchforks, are we?
No. This is more strategic.
Yeah.
He saw it as a way to disrupt the enemy, to wear them down, constant pressure.
Yeah.
Make it really difficult to control territory. Imagine you're this regular army trying to maintain order, but you're facing these guerrilla attacks, sabotage, a total lack of cooperation from the local population.
That sounds like a nightmare.
It is.
And it's really relevant.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, to a lot of the conflicts we see today, this idea of insurgency, unconventional warfare.
Absolutely.
Okay, so if we're talking about disrupting the enemy, we have to talk about attack and defense, right? That's one of the key ideas in war. But, and I gotta be honest, this is where I get a little confused. Didn't Clausewitz say that defense is the stronger form of warfare?
Yeah.
But how? Isn't the attacker, like, dictating the terms, the pace? They have all the momentum.
I mean, that's kind of the common assumption.
Yeah.
But Clausewitz, he flips that on its head.
Right.
He argues that a well-executed defense, it's about strategically using time and position.
Okay.
To your advantage, right?
Right.
You're maximizing your strengths while also exploiting the attacker's weaknesses.
But doesn't choosing a defensive position mean you're ceding the initiative, letting the enemy kind of call the shots?
Not necessarily. Think of it more like choosing the battleground where you have the advantage. You're not just passively waiting for the enemy to attack. You're using the terrain, fortifications, even the climate to wear them down. Make them pay a heavy price for every advance.
So you're picking your spots, right?
Yeah.
Choosing when and where to engage. And you're making the enemy bleed for every inch they take.
Exactly. And in doing so, you force them to overextend, deplete their resources, make mistakes, and that's when you strike back.
Ah, okay. So you're saying a successful defense, it's about more than just holding your ground. You create opportunities to transition into a counterattack.
Yeah.
That's when you seize the initiative. You turn the tables on the enemy.
Precisely. And Clausewitz believed that a purely passive defense, it'll eventually crumble.
Okay.
The goal is to shift from defense to offense, use the momentum you've gained to achieve your political goals.
So it's this constant dance, this interplay between attack and defense. You got to know when to shift gears.
That's it.
When to absorb the blow and when to deliver the knockout punch.
Yeah, great analogy. But, to really understand Clausewitz's concept of defense, we need to look at some historical examples.
Okay, yeah. Because I'm still trying to wrap my head around how defense can be the stronger form of warfare.
Right.
So let's delve into those examples in part 2, see how these ideas play out, in the messy reality of war. Okay, I'm ready for those examples. Prove to me that defense can be the stronger form of warfare.
All right. Well, how about Frederick the Great of Prussia?
Oh, yeah.
This guy faced incredible odds during the 7 Years' War. I mean, constantly outmaneuvered, outnumbered, you name it.
Yeah, he was definitely up against it. But how did he survive,
Right.
let alone achieve any kind of victory? I mean, I wouldn't call him the poster child for strong defense.
But that's exactly the point. He didn't win through, brute force or just aggressive attacks.
Yeah.
He survived by carefully choosing his battles.
Yeah.
Leveraging Prussia's kind of limited resources and waiting for the right moment to strike back. He was a master of the counterattack.
So he was exhausting his enemies, forcing them to the negotiating table.
Yeah, exactly.
By using kind of a flexible defense.
Yeah.
He was able to outlast them. It's like that old saying, the winner isn't the one who hits the hardest, but the one who can take the most punches.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And it highlights another key aspect of Clausewitz's thinking,
Yeah.
It's about understanding your own strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah.
But also your enemies.
Right. So it's not just about choosing a defensive position. It's about knowing why that position is advantageous to you.
Right.
And disadvantageous for your opponent. You're not just reacting, you're setting the trap in a way.
Exactly. And that brings us back to Clausewitz's idea of the nation in arms.
Yeah.
Remember, he believed that those popular uprisings, they could be a crucial element of a successful defense.
Yeah. Yeah, we talked about that. But it still seems kind of risky to me.
Right.
You're relying on untrained civilians to fight a war. It just sounds chaotic and unpredictable, which I guess Clausewitz was okay with, but I don't know.
Well, he definitely understood the risks.
Yeah.
But he also saw the potential. I mean, think about the Spanish resistance against Napoleon. They weren't a regular army, but they were able to harass the French. Disrupt supply lines, make it really hard to control the country.
It's almost like guerrilla warfare, right?
Exactly. And Napoleon himself, he called it his Spanish ulcer. Just this constant source of irritation, drain on his resources.
So even Napoleon couldn't completely subdue a population that was determined to resist.
Right.
That's a powerful example. But how do you actually harness that kind of popular resistance? I mean, it just seems like this wild card. Not something you can easily control.
Oh, it's definitely a challenge. And Clausewitz, he acknowledged that,
Right.
but he didn't advocate for just, unleashing a mob.
Yeah.
He believed these uprisings, they needed to be carefully channeled,
Yeah.
integrated into the overall strategy. It's a tool,
Yeah.
not a solution in itself.
So you're finding ways to, like, amplify that popular energy, direct it towards specific goals.
Precisely. And that requires understanding the political and social dynamics.
Yeah.
Why are people resisting? What motivates them? How can you tap into those motivations and turn them into an asset strategically?
It all comes back to that idea. War is merely the continuation of policy by other means. It's not just about military maneuvers. It's about understanding the bigger picture, the politics, the human element, the will of the people.
That's crucial. War is never just about brute force.
Right.
It's about psychology, it's about strategy, and ultimately achieving those political goals. And sometimes a well-executed defense fueled by that popular resistance, that can be the most effective way to achieve them.
Okay, yeah, you've convinced me. Defense is powerful. But let's not forget, Clausewitz always emphasized the dynamic nature of war, right? This constant back and forth. So even within a defensive strategy, you got to be flexible, you got to seize opportunities and shift to the offensive when the time is right.
Absolutely. And that brings us to another key concept.
Okay.
The idea of the center of gravity.
Oh, yeah. You mentioned that earlier. It sounds kind of like a physics term,
Right.
but I'm guessing he meant something a little different.
He did. He used center of gravity to describe the critical factor, that linchpin that holds the enemy's whole war effort together.
Okay.
It could be their army, their capital city, their political leadership, even their national morale.
So it's like finding their Achilles heel.
Right.
That weak spot, that if you hit it, the whole thing comes crashing down. But how do you identify that
Right.
in the middle of all that chaos?
It's a huge challenge, but Clausewitz argued that understanding the enemy's center of gravity, that's essential for creating a winning strategy. And to illustrate this, he often pointed to Napoleon's invasion of Russia back in 1812.
Oh, yeah. Classic example.
Right.
Wasn't the Russian winter like Napoleon's undoing?
Oh, the harsh winter definitely played a role. But Clausewitz argued that Napoleon's real mistake was misidentifying Russia's center of gravity.
Okay.
Napoleon, he thought if he could capture Moscow, the Tsar would surrender.
Yeah, I mean, it was the capital. Seems logical.
Right, but it turned out to be a trap.
Oh.
The Russians, they were willing to just abandon Moscow, let it burn, rather than surrender. And as Napoleon's army, marched deeper into Russia, their supply lines, they got stretched thinner, the weather turned against them, they faced constant harassment.
So Moscow wasn't the true center of gravity. What was it then?
Well, Clausewitz argued, Russia's real strength lay in its vast size, its harsh climate, and the resilience of its people. Their center of gravity wasn't a place.
Right.
It was their will to resist. The ability to take a punch and keep fighting.
That's interesting. It's not always about taking territory or destroying armies. Sometimes it's about understanding their psychology, their sources of strength, and then finding ways to undermine those.
Exactly. And that's why Clausewitz's idea of the center of gravity, it's still so relevant today. It forces us to think beyond just conventional targets and to consider those broader factors, the political, the social, even the psychological factors that influence, the course of the conflict. It's about understanding the enemy's true source of power and then devising a strategy to exploit its vulnerabilities.
Okay, yeah. I'm starting to see how all this ties together, right? The Trinity, the concept of defense, the nation in arms, and this focus on identifying the center of gravity. It's a framework for understanding war. But we've covered a lot here.
We have.
Maybe it's time to move on to part 3.
Okay.
See how Clausewitz's ideas can help us make sense of, well, the messy reality of war in the 21st century. Okay, so we've spent like this whole deep dive, going through these Clausewitzian ideas.
Yeah.
The remarkable Trinity, the power of defense, the nation in arms, and, this focus on the center of gravity. But I gotta be honest, it's kind of hard to imagine how this stuff applies to modern warfare.
Right.
I mean, things have changed so much since the Napoleonic era.
Yeah.
Like we have drones now.
Totally different.
Cyber warfare, nuclear weapons. It's just a completely different game now.
It's true. The technology has evolved dramatically.
Yeah.
But Clausewitz's principles, they're still relevant. At its core, war is this clash of wills, this struggle for power, for influence. And that hasn't changed.
Yeah, I get that. But how can a guy who died in 1831 have anything useful to say about, like, 21st century conflicts? It's like comparing apples and oranges.
Let's take cyber warfare.
Right.
It might seem like a totally new domain, but if you look at it through the lens of Clausewitz, you start to see the connections.
Okay. All right. I'm intrigued. Give me an example.
Think about the center of gravity,
Hmm.
right? In a traditional war, it might be an army or a capital city. But in cyber warfare, it could be a nation's critical infrastructure,
Okay.
their power grid, their financial systems, their communication networks.
Yeah.
These are all things that are, essential for a modern society to function. So if you could disrupt or disable those systems.
You can cripple them.
Yeah. And that's where Clausewitz's emphasis on strategy and psychology, it really comes in.
Yeah.
Cyber warfare isn't just about, hacking skills. It's about understanding your opponent, their vulnerabilities, your fears, their dependencies, and then exploiting those weaknesses to achieve your political goals.
So it's like a digital version of the nation in arms.
Ooh, interesting.
Instead of citizens with pitchforks, it's hackers and bots, right?
I like that.
Sowing chaos, disrupting systems.
It really highlights, how these ideas, they could be adapted and applied to these new forms of conflict.
Yeah.
Clausewitz, he understood that war is constantly evolving. It's always one step ahead of the technology. So his focus was on those underlying principles, the timeless dynamics that drive human conflict.
Yeah, okay. So we're not just talking about tactics. It's strategic thinking.
Right.
Big picture stuff. It's not about winning battles. It's about achieving political goals, influencing perceptions, shaping the post-war landscape.
Exactly. And that's why, On War is still such a vital text, even today. It's a reminder that war is never just a military endeavor.
Right.
It's intertwined with politics, economics, culture, psychology.
And maybe that's the most important takeaway from all this. Never lose sight of the human element. It's not about tanks or drones or cyber attacks. It's about people.
Yeah.
Their hopes, their fears, their motivations, this capacity for incredible violence, but also incredible resilience.
That's powerful. And it's at the heart of Clausewitz. He understood that war is complex, it's messy, it's ultimately tragic.
Yeah.
And his work, it challenges us to really grapple with those complexities, to think critically about conflict, and, to search for ways to prevent it, or if it's unavoidable, to wage it in a way that, minimizes the suffering and maximizes the chances of a lasting peace.
Well, I have to say, coming into this, I was pretty intimidated by Clausewitz, but you've really helped me to see how relevant his ideas still are, even in today's world.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Yeah, he can be a challenging read, but it's definitely worth the effort. I encourage you to keep exploring On War.
I will.
And, apply his insights to the challenges we face today.
Absolutely. And for our listeners, I want to leave you with a final thought from Clausewitz himself. He said, war is essentially a gamble. It's a reminder that even with, all the planning, all the technology, the brilliant strategists, there's always uncertainty, chance, the unknown. So as we navigate the 21st century, keep that in mind. War is a gamble, and the stakes, they couldn't be higher.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
And thank you for being our guide. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.